Welcome, everybody. This is Robbie Martin, and this is the 11th episode of MAME Politics coming at you. Thanks for joining me today. Sometimes it takes a little while for people to come into the chat and see my announcement that I'm doing this. We're not running a very tight ship over here at MAME Politics, in case you didn't realize that. It's a real loosey-goosey ship for right now. I'm going to cruise over to the chat. Hey, everybody. So, yeah. Let me tell you a little bit first what games we're going to play today, because there are a couple of weird ones, for sure. So, who here was a teenager when Mortal Kombat came out? Who in this chat remembers the era of Mortal Kombat sweeping the arcades, quickly becoming the most popular game in arcades, and then being dethroned by only Mortal Kombat 2? And Mortal Kombat 2's popularity was way bigger than Mortal Kombat 1, to such a degree that it was the first time as a child, or just as a teen, young teen, I can remember people literally competing in arcade games, or in arcades, crowded around a single cabinet, stacking their quarters up as sort of an honor system. You remembered which quarter was yours, and you put it in a line on the right or left side of the arcade to sort of delineate your turn in the arcade. Mortal Kombat 2 was hugely popular. It wasn't just because of the fatalities and the blood, but let's be honest, it probably mostly was because of that. It was definitely a novelty at the time to see a video game that was that violent, that gory, and also just that well designed. I mean, it wasn't just because it was gory and violent, it was also an extremely well designed game. Great graphics, great gameplay, very nice, smooth programming. Somebody just mentioned that Mortal Kombat 1 had sweat instead of blood. That's correct. Nintendo, at the time Mortal Kombat 1 came out, refused to put any blood in any of their games on any of their console systems. They had like a unspoken rule that they were basically not going to put out anything with violence.
BloodStorm.
Nice, Bird World. Is watching my stream on TV at work. That is fucking boss-like activity. Well, your boss went home early, so now you're the boss. So, Super Nintendo, to a lot of people, had the lesser version of Mortal Kombat 1. No blood. Had fatalities, oddly, but they weren't bloody fatalities. They involved things like freezing your opponent, covering them in ice, and then they would just die. Like Sub-Zero's fatality was turned into that. I think Kano just ended up punching a hole in you that you didn't see it. So they changed around all the fatalities in Super Nintendo. By the time Mortal Kombat 2 rolled around, Nintendo realized that they didn't want to give Sega Genesis an edge in any way, shape, or form. Sega at the time was going directly after Nintendo as a company, mocking them for their games being slow, which wasn't really true. Even though Sega technically had a faster microprocessor inside their system, the whole blast processing thing was a total joke, like marketing gimmick. But Sega was really going directly after Nintendo a little bit before this time period. And I'm speculating here, but it seems as if Nintendo caved finally and said, you know what? We are going to release Mortal Kombat 2 just like the arcade, and it's going to be even better than the Genesis version because our system has more colors, better sound, and it was. I mean, it was a better version of Mortal Kombat 2. I don't think anyone would argue that the Sega Genesis version of Mortal Kombat 2 is that great because the Super Nintendo version just kicked its ass. and it would have also kicked the Mortal Kombat 1 for Super Nintendo would have kicked the Genesis Mortal Kombat's ass had it had blood, because at the time that's all anybody cared about. Um, the Sega CD Mortal Kombat 2 Obnobs, it still is worse than the Super Nintendo because it has lower colors. Anything on the Sega CD had to go through the um, the Sega hardware. So I think actually probably the best version of Mortal Kombat 2 that ended up coming out during that era was probably the Mortal Kombat 2 for the 32X, which was an add-on for the Sega Genesis that added more color, better sound. It added some 3D processors to it. That's why Virtua Fighter and Virtua Racing were able to be released on the 32X. That ran pretty smoothly. Doom was ported to the 32X. But I think Mortal Kombat 2 on the 32X was better than the Super Nintendo one, but nobody bought the 32X. It kind of just came and went. It came out right before the Sega Saturn came out. But my friend had a 32X. They're relatively easy to find nowadays. You can find them for probably under $40. But the problem is you need to find them with the power adapter and I believe two connector cables that are specially made for it. So to actually plug it into your Sega Genesis, you need several cables. You need basically a slot on your power strip for two giant AC adapters. Really big pain in the ass. And a lot of the times the 32X just inexplicably did not work. The connection was bad between the unit and the Genesis. So this interesting game I wanted to play for you guys today. Well, two interesting games. I would say one of them is pretty shitty, but aesthetically holds a special place in my heart because it was the first time I had seen another arcade game besides Mortal Kombat that was genuinely bloody and that was a fighting game. That fighting game is called Time Killers. Came out in 1992. It was released by a company called Strata. I believe they were one of the only American companies working at this time besides Midway, putting out arcade games that were still being distributed worldwide. Strata is a bizarre company because they are mostly known not for making arcade games, but for making 3D rendering software. Their original software is what Maya later became. So Strata developed a bunch of visual tools. I forgot the name of what they originally called it, but I believe that Maya, whatever Maya is, which is a very predominant tool in CGI now, comes originally from a software that Strata created. The name escapes me right now. So they have an interesting history as a company, and you would think that the graphics on their games would be better had they also been making 3D rendering software at the time. But you would be wrong because the graphics on their games are very peculiar, let's just say. They have a very specific look. They look 16-bit, arguably, but they don't look that good. And Time Killers looks even worse than this game that I'm playing, or that I'm showing you right now. The game that's on the screen currently is the sequel, the spiritual sequel to Time Killers called BloodStorm. Now, BloodStorm was meant to compete with Mortal Kombat 2. So Strata really put their all into this game. This is definitely their hardest worked on, most in-depth game. For a fighting game, it actually has quite a lot of cool mechanics and special moves and different gameplay types. You wouldn't know it just by looking at these terrible images that I'm showing you now. But if you notice, each character has a weapon. They have a weapon that is actually detachable and that can be removed during gameplay and thrown at the other character. You can also pick up the other character's weapon and use it against them. And this, funnily enough, even though this game BloodStorm was a ripoff of Mortal Kombat 2 in almost every regard, except for the way it looks visually, Mortal Kombat 4 I believe, actually stole the gameplay mechanic of weapons-based combat straight from BloodStorm. And they probably felt that were completely within their rights to do it because BloodStorm was directly competing with them. In fact, BloodStorm's marketing tried to throw Mortal Kombat under the bus, and this is the part that I think I talked a little bit about on a previous episode. Adam G says he loves MK4. I'm glad I'm not the only one, Adam G. When I first saw MK4 in the arcade, I think like a lot of other people, I was really, really bummed out by the way that it looked. I thought the graphics on it were shitty, but over time, I really learned to appreciate the gameplay in it. I thought that Mortal Kombat 4, in terms of the gameplay, was kind of a culmination of all the best gameplay types from the previous Mortal Kombat games. And Mortal Kombat 4 especially, they finally took out really severely damaging special moves like uppercuts. Different dial-up combos wouldn't take a huge amount off your life bar, so the rounds would last longer on that game. The weapons combat added a whole different dimension to it. You could avoid projectiles by moving into 3D space. You could do air combos. I don't know if you guys remember this in Mortal Kombat 4. You could do like a jumping punch and then a kick. So you can actually do like a double hit combo in the air. But I believe Mortal Kombat 4 actually stole the weapons mechanic from this game. So I'd say for BloodStorm, to give it some credit, BloodStorm has a really interesting weapons mechanic in their gameplay that no other fighting game had at the time. So a couple episodes ago, I was telling you about Daniel Pesina, who plays Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. The same actor plays it at both games, even though he looks really different in Mortal Kombat 2. When this game came out, apparently, and I don't know the backstory to this, so there's probably more backstory, but Daniel Pesina, the actor who plays Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat 2, has some kind of falling out with the game creators of Mortal Kombat. And immediately after that, he decided to appear in an advertisement for BloodStorm. So let me just show you this weirdness. So here's a Daniel Pesina dressed as Johnny Cage, keep in mind, appearing in a print advertisement for Strata's BloodStorm, an Electronic Gaming Monthly. So take a look at the balls on that dude for just dressing as the character from Mortal Kombat 2 and appearing in an ad. Pretty crazy thing to do. And it says on the ad itself, not only does it have his signature, he's playing Mortal Kombat, it says he has switched to BloodStorm. And it gets worse. So he was having a lot of fun during this little photo shoot. He even did a little Jean-Claude Van Damme style splits across 2 BloodStorm arcade machines, which you can see here in the photo. So these are real photos of Mortal Kombat actor Daniel Pesina appearing in a competitor's advertisement. These are behind the scenes photos. Here's another one. So that's his Jean-Claude Van Damme splits photo. I don't know if that one appeared in print, but here's the last one where he's doing a little axe kick or a high kick at the marquee of BloodStorm. So, of course, this did not make the Mortal Kombat development team very happy. And as a result, Mortal Kombat 3 has no Johnny Cage in it. So that's the little backstory to why there is no Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat 3, who was sort of a staple character in the previous 2 games. And it's also why on the Mortal Kombat Trilogy home release game that has Johnny Cage in it, it's also why that Johnny Cage is not played by Daniel Pesina. It is played by a different actor. I think it was Eurovision, or there was like whatever company put out the home release version of Mortal Kombat Trilogy. They actually photographed their own Johnny Cage and put him in the game. It wasn't even done by the original makers of the arcade game. So the Mortal Kombat Trilogy with Johnny Cage in it is not Daniel Pesina. It's a different dude. Tom Collector. Yes, I did play Time Killers, and we're going to play Time Killers today, in fact, after this this little demo of BloodStorm. So, I haven't mentioned anything political yet, in case you haven't noticed that already. You probably have. I think one guy came in here and he's like, "Who cares?" I think it's the first time I've seen him comment in here, so he might have been upset that I was just ranting about Mortal Kombat, and I can understand that. But I am going to talk about some issues that are of a serious nature today. John Gold says impeachment. ... Snore. Yeah, I don't know if I'm really going to talk about that today because it is a real shit show. It is really, really boring. And it's just not being talked about in a way that I find interesting by really anybody right now, frankly. Um, it's just kind of a mess all around. But of course, I'm sure most of you guys have already heard that Tulsi Gabbard filed a, I want to say, $50 million lawsuit against Hillary Clinton for saying that she was a Russian asset or some kind of plant. I want to get your take on that. Oh my God, yeah, Ned Ryerson, great name by the way too. I know I'm a fan of the Ned Ryerson character from Groundhog Day. Great film. Ned Ryerson says, Biden, why? Why you getting nervous, man? Why? I mean, I don't know what the fuck Biden's problem is, but I talked about this on a previous podcast with Tom Secker on Media Roots Radio that Biden seems to think that dialing up the Trumpness of his personality is going to be successful for him. He seems to be getting more and more Trump-like by the day, and by Trump-like, I don't mean having this special sauce that Trump has. Because even if you hate Trump, you have to agree that there's something unique about his ability to be a bull in a china shop. Biden just doesn't have the same appeal. I mean, he's not charming in any way, shape, or form when he does it. He just thinks that being a bull in a china shop and swaggering his way through the election is a good move for him, good approach for him because it worked for Trump. I mean, I don't know if that's his thinking. I'm obviously totally speculating. But that was a really bizarre exchange. The guy just asked him like why, and proceeded to ask a question after each why. I think the guy started 3 different questions with why. So Biden, just being the psychopath loser that he is, turns around to the reporter and goes, Why? Why you get so nervous, man? And the craziest part about it, honestly, wasn't even his bizarre vocalizations that make him sound like an insane man addled with dementia. And actually, that just made me sad to say that because Terry Jones, who is near and dear to me, I am a huge Monty Python fan. My wife, Lori, really likes Terry Jones. He's her favorite Python. Passed away today at the age of 77. So rest in peace, Terry. He did have a severe case of dementia. Apparently, he did pass away from dementia, which can happen if the dementia is severe enough. So I kind of felt bad using that to characterize Joe Biden, even though I think he's the most disgusting piece of shit ever. But it just kind of triggered me a little bit to think about that. I hadn't thought about it since this morning. So R.I.P. Terry. We love you. Yeah, it's that Vic Berger video of it was insanely good. But the weirdest part of that exchange was when Joe Biden does this to the guy at the end. Did you guys see this? He gives him like a jock, like fist on his chest, beating. It's like I mean, you just can't go around touching people like that. I mean, you would think that just as a politician in general, as a rule, you wouldn't touch a reporter, right? Unless you shake their hand, something like that, right? But Joe Biden thinks it's appropriate to punch a reporter like he's in a fucking locker room. It's just like, what in the fuck are you doing? It's I don't even know how much more I could talk about it because it's confounding. I mean, I just can't believe it. Meg Robot says he doesn't have self-awareness. I mean, I think at a certain point, it's like he probably does have self-awareness. He just acts like he doesn't care. My take on it is he thinks acting like he doesn't care is some kind of positive attribute. Like, I'm just gonna act like I don't give a fuck. I mean, it's strange. For some reason, one of the strangest moments to me of his entire campaign so far isn't even these things that are getting headlines right now. It was something that I watched myself live on the debate stage, right when the first debate was over. Biden was not getting down from the stage, and at this point, let's just set the stage here, no pun intended. Most of the candidates after the debate were walking in the crowd because traditionally what you do is you start to walk in the crowd to encounter reporters, to shake hands of supporters, to talk to people, to sort of mingle. That's the tradition. Now, what Biden did after the first debate is he stayed on stage, and he was the only one remaining on stage. So, because of that, a reporter tried to get his attention while he was still on stage. Now, what Biden did is he engaged in a conversation with this reporter while Biden was still standing on the stage. The reporter was on the ground. And the reporter started to talk to Biden, and Biden like answers one question and then just starts walking away from the reporter, but talking to other people on the stage. So the reporter on the ground, keeps following Biden, and Biden just keeps talking to him on and off while he's like also being distracted and also having like a parallel conversation with other people on the stage. And this keeps happening for about a minute and a half. I mean, it's super awkward. So this reporter just seems like he's trying to catch Joe Biden's attention. He's not really listening. He's half listening, even though he's on live TV. You would think any politician would either choose one or the other, do an interview with the reporter, or continue to talk to people, and then when you're done with that, come talk to the reporter. No, he chose to do both at the same time. So that's already very awkward and weird. Biden finally comes down from the stage and starts talking to the guy like really aggressively, almost like the guy had upset him by interrupting his mingling on the stage. I'm not really sure, but Biden proceeded to go like this to the guy while he's talking to him, and then like go like this. I think at one point he even puts his finger like square on his breastplate as he's talking to him, and I was thinking, man, if someone did that to me, I would get like fury. I would suddenly get furious. Like, I don't care who it is. If someone is talking to me in a condescending way and they're touching me on the chest, like it would instantly trigger me into an angry state. I'd be like, whoa, dude, like get your fucking hands off of me. I mean, that's what I would feel inside. I'd be like, this is fucked up. You do not fucking touch me. So it's just strange that he doesn't have any boundaries like that, or he just acts like he doesn't. You know, this swagger. Yeah, John, I wanted to get a clarification on that. So John Gold just said that Joe Biden met with Lieutenant General Mahmoud Ahmed of the Pakistani ISI during the week of 9/11. Was that not on the morning of 9/11? It was only a few days after, right? Because I think I incorrectly stated a few days ago that it was on the morning of 9/11. Is it on the morning of 9/11? Emu sings, which Google whistleblower are you talking about? Zach Voorhees? Is Zach Voorhees the guy who gave all those cache of documents to James O'Keefe? Because if you're talking about him, Emu, I do not trust any whistleblower who decides to give a cache of documents to a journalist like James O'Keefe. I think that is extremely fishy, suspicious as fuck, and should be additionally investigated. Why did this Google employee, why was he such a partisan dumb fuck to give the documents to a journalist who is literally being bankrolled by Trump, who has committed literal frauds before? That's very bad form. If he was a legit whistleblower who had all this important information to share with the public, I think he really fucked it up by giving him to someone like James O'Keefe. And what's unfortunate is that James O'Keefe framed that whole thing in the framework of Google is censoring conservatives. And as you know, I've long believed that the idea that Google is censoring conservatives and that's the main problem is a distraction from the overall larger problem. That Google and Silicon Valley companies are conspiring with think tanks, with aspects of the military-industrial complex, with government officials to censor everybody online who has controversial enough opinions that challenge the status quo and that challenge power. And I do not believe that people like James O'Keefe and his ilk truly challenge power. But in terms of that shooting at YouTube, my only opinion on that is that it was horrifying. It was sad that that happened. But at the same time, I don't think that's the end of that. I think that YouTube has such arbitrary censorship rules and they do such arbitrary bullshit that they're going to eventually make someone else really, really upset who will want to commit violence on them. So they need to change their policies to some extent. I'm not saying because they got a shooter to their location, but her reasoning for getting so upset at YouTube actually makes quite a bit of sense to me. If you read the shooter's actual reasons for getting upset at YouTube, I'd be upset at that too if that happened to my account. Black Fox, no, I do not believe in Pizzagate. Primarily because I saw the seeds being planted for Pizzagate by people like Eric Prince and Cassandra Fairbanks, who I believe are disinfo operators. And as soon as I saw those fingerprints on the initial breadcrumb delivery, I was like, okay, something's really fishy about this conspiracy theory being weaponized online. This is really, really fishy. And I've always thought that since the very moment the Podesta emails were interpreted into Pizzagate. And I could explain in much more detail why I think that. I have a lot of reasons for thinking that. I believe Pizzagate was the October surprise that helped Trump win the election, if I'm being completely honest. I think without Pizzagate, we might not have had Trump as president. I'll say that again. I think if Pizzagate did not happen, Trump might not have won the election. I believe Pizzagate had that significant of an effect on the voting populace. I'm going to get to, I'm just going to play a little bit of this game while I talk to you guys. So I have a move fac for this game, since it's filled with special moves, just like Mortal Kombat. So let's see, I'm Mirage. Let's get some of these special moves in here. So first I need to actually figure out what the regular moves are. Gauntlet related moves: forward back arm plus back leg, throw gauntlet, pick up gauntlet, away plus front arm, gauntlet special power, quarter circle front arm. Okay, I'm gonna try some of these out. So throwing the gauntlet, forward plus back arm plus back leg. Let's give that a try. Zeke Thomas, Posobiec, if he claimed responsibility for Pizzagate, he might have done some stuff behind the scenes to get it to float. But From what I understand, his claim to fame as a journalist was doing a live Periscope from within inside Pizzagate. And after that, he blew up online, like hundreds of thousands of followers within like 2 years. I mean, very, very sus. Very sus. So I think it's actually very possible that he was responsible for helping deploy it internally with whatever internal disinformation team was sort of behind deploying that. Absolutely, he was probably involved in that because his rise to popularity makes absolutely no sense. There is no way in hell that Jack Posobiec rose to that being that popular from doing a Periscope stream from with inside Comet Pizza. That was a total setup. There were people who boosted him, and sadly, I think even Julian Assange, using the official WikiLeaks account, boosted him. That was a really bad move on Julian Assange's part, in my opinion. Austin, just so you know, I don't allow kind of just anti-Semitic nonsense in this chat. So if you're serious when you say the Jews control the news, unless you're being sarcastic, I can't. That's not for me in this chat. So just putting that out there. I don't like to kick people from the chat, but I will if they start flooding it with what I describe as reverse Hasbara, which is things to flood comment sections or chats with borderline or direct anti-Semitism to associate my work and all the other people in this chat with gross politics like anti-Semitism. And so I can't allow that. All right, so I'm gonna try to throw my goddamn gauntlet here. Oh my god, look at that. I already got fatality. Jesus Christ. Oh my god, I got my arm cut off. Oh shit, and my weapon. So I managed to throw my weapon here. Look at that. Oh fuck, dude. Whoa. Wow. That's pretty brutal. Wow. Let's try this again. Okay, so I have a block button. I didn't even realize I have block. Jesus. God, that computer AI is cranked up like a motherfucker. So I got my head cut off in round 1. But here I am again. I'm in round 2. Tom Collector, yes, Strata. If you didn't join me on the beginning of this broadcast, I was explaining the history of Strata, an American video game company that made Time Killers and BloodStorm. Sadly, probably the 2 most famous games they ever put out. They did put out another bizarre racing game around the same time as BloodStorm. But this game is actually better than Time Killers, I would argue. It has actual playable gameplay. Time Killers is pretty unplayable as far as a fighting game is concerned. I mean, it has really poor gameplay mechanics, poor collision. This game, they really actually worked pretty hard to make sure the collision feels like Mortal Kombat. Oh, man. Yeah, Black Fox. I completely acknowledge that those Comet Pizza, what was his name, James Alefantis Instagram photos were very suspicious and questionable, at the very least. I definitely did. I definitely also think it's weird that John Podesta is doing having Marina Abramovich do spirit cooking performances at his home. However, what I think basically happened is a form of satanic panic. So if you remember, if any kids here grew up in the 80s, you will remember the era when heavy metal music was all satanic. You play the albums backwards and you get secret messages to kill your family and your friends. All these secret satanic rituals across the country where people were sacrificing babies and doing ritualistic abortions. All these stories in the 80s basically never happened. But yet, in the 80s, you'll see plenty of TV specials by Geraldo and other stupid motherfuckers like him promoting this idea of satanic ritualistic abuse. Now, just putting this out there, I hope nobody will take offense to this, but I think the idea of satanic ritualistic abuse is an urban legend that mostly really stupid people believe. And I'm not trying to equate really stupid people with evangelical Christians, but they're pretty close. I mean, let's be honest. Mostly a kind of a conspiracy theory that has existed only in the domain of evangelical Christians. Tom Collector says, a better explanation is just that Podesta is some lame fart guy who thinks he's cool collecting weird art and art installation nonsense. That's been my interpretation of it the whole time. So it saddens me. I actually I'll tell you guys a little anecdote really quick. Sometimes people in the conspiracy movement scare me. They creep me out. Even though I've been there, I tabled at the last 9/11 Truth Film Festival. Most of the people there are very sane, nice people. But if you've ever sort of dove into this world, you'll know that what I'm saying is that some of these people are actually creepy, scary individuals that are, and I don't want to disparage mentally ill people, but they are mentally ill in a way that probably should get medical attention. So I had someone approach me at a show that I did in San Francisco. And if this guy hears this, or if he ever hears about me talking about this, I apologize. But yes, I had someone approach me at a show, and they said that we had gotten into it about Pizzagate on Twitter or something. That was like the way that the guy introduced himself to me. He was already talking to me at a show, and let me stress this too. It wasn't like I was going to speak or table or show a very heavy agenda. This was like me playing music under my alias Fluorescent Grey, right? So someone introduced themselves to me as a fan of Media Roots Radio. I don't remember their name offhand, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't say it here. And I was like, hey, nice to meet you. It's cool. Right when I was finished setting up, the guy comes up to me, or maybe it was actually when I was done playing. He comes up to me and he said, you and me got into it one time about Pizzagate on Twitter or online somewhere. And so my first thought is, okay, is this guy, does he want to argue with me? Does he want to confront me about not agreeing on Pizzagate with him? And set shot, I mean, he pretty much told me that the kill room, that John Podesta's kill room was completely proven, totally legit, and that learning about Pizzagate was what he thinks was the equivalent of learning about 9/11 for me. That's how much it opened his eyes, and he doesn't understand why, I'm sort of not willing to be red-pilled in the same way. And I gotta admit, the interaction did creep me out. Not because this guy was aggressive or mean or rude. It was because I was worried of where it was going to go next. Whether he was going to accuse me of being some kind of pedo-gate cover-upper or something like that, I didn't know. But the experience just kind of did creep me out and felt a little bit unsettling to me. And maybe that's just my own sensibilities, to be honest. I don't know. But it made me nervous, to say the very least. And I don't even know why I'm talking about this right now. I mean, there's really that's the end of the story. There wasn't really any resolution to it. It was just it was just a little jarring. So I occasionally have to remember that there are people out there who will approach you and bring up really, really crazy things, or try to push you into crazy things, or they might even act very aggressive towards you for not being on the same page as they are. Another example of what I'm talking about, and this was a genuine case, I believe, of deeply mentally ill, untreated person who is not getting psychological help. Someone came to one of the Project Censored events where Abby was speaking, I think about 2 years ago, and he was walking around with an old children's book, and he had a backpack, and I was already sort of in a state of PTSD. The ghost ship fire had just happened where 3 of my friends died. 36 people passed away in a terrible fire in Oakland. Deeply traumatizing for me. My wife knew the people who passed away. It was just a deeply traumatizing time. So I was already on edge at this Project Censored event. And this guy was walking around with this backpack, carrying around this book, and he was going up to random people and talking to them and trying to convince them that this book that he had about a girl named Abby from like 1982 or something told the whole story of Abby, and it predicted her going on RT and that she was possibly in danger or something like that. And then he needed to warn her. So immediately when I saw that, I'm like, can somebody get this guy out of here? Like, my feeling was, I don't know if this guy is going to be violent. I don't know how unstable he is, but I can clearly see that something about him is extremely unstable, and I do not feel comfortable being in the same room with this man. And I didn't really raise too much of a stink about it, so I just decided to sort of watch him in the background from a distance and make sure that he didn't do anything crazy. And nothing happened. He ended up leaving without a hitch. It was fine. But he was also going around the convention saying that everybody who was there was a disinformation agent being paid by the CIA. So at a certain point, I was thinking, why is this guy even here? Like, it was weird. He was trying to say that Doug Valentine, everybody who was like selling books there was some kind of CIA agent. I don't know who Dave Schlesinger is. John, tell me who he is. I hope he's not related to Laura Schlesinger, radio personality. So I'm picking Fallout now. Look at this badass. So did Mortal Kombat copy the design of Cabal off of this guy? Is this guy supposed to be Bane? Kind of looks like Bane, doesn't he? So this game has a bunch of stage fatalities actually too. So it doesn't just have like fatalities that you can do. You can actually like knock guys into this lava and shit. I'm gonna try to fuck this motherfucker up though. Okay. Oh God. John Gold, yeah, what you're describing sounds like a lot of people who are generally gravitate around the 9/11 truth movement. I mean, you're pretty sold on this game, Mega Robot, really? Well, it plays beautifully on emulators, and it has a ton of special moves per character. I just didn't have time to look through the FAQ and practice any special moves on this. But yeah, it's not bad. I mean, in terms of the collision detection and everything else, I mean, I think it plays just as good as like any Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. Adam G. I hope you don't think a very heavy agenda has anything to do with aliens. Maybe I'm a little confused by your comment. Yeah, Ned Ryerson, I know what you mean. The graphics are absolute garbage. I mean, look at the background right there. you'll see what appears to be a 3D rendered, pre-rendered asset, like that pyramid, but it looks like shittier than anything like Rareware ever did. Rareware is a company that put out a lot of great looking games that use 3D pre-rendered graphics. No, I mean, John, that's true. I mean, the U.S. military, the Navy, did release a video showing an aircraft trying to track a UFO. I think once they release that, it's kind of, we're in a new ball game now, where it's kind of like, oh, now the military is not only acknowledging that UFOs are quote unquote real, like Unbuttered Toast said, but they're also releasing video of it. I mean, that's a very strange thing. Jimmy Dore had an interesting theory about it. He said that it was obviously some way to get money for the Space Force to like scare people or something. I couldn't say. I honestly have been thinking about this for a while, and I kind of get stuck. Like I go in little loops in my head trying to imagine why all of a sudden they would release this video footage. What purpose could it serve now? Especially under the Trump administration. It's a strange, strange time we live in. I mean, there's so many things happening on a daily basis that it's almost impossible to remember, even in the last year, how many crazy things were revealed to us. I mean, even let's just isolate the Lyme's disease thing. I mean, there's now credible research being done. There's a very popular book that came out that says Lyme's disease was a U.S. government engineered biological weapon. I mean, how crazy is that? 10 years ago, that would have been seen as a completely insane sounding conspiracy theory that makes you a tinfoil hat lunatic. But it's actually a fairly credible theory. Oh, Adam G. Are you looking for nine? So I think Adam G, this is a question he asked last time, so I might as well engage with this now. 9/11 documentaries that are not crazy. Not crazy conspiracy things. I think is kind of what you're looking for, right? Am I getting that right? Andy Miller says, I think the UFO thing gave people a slightly more positive opinion about the military. That's an interesting point as well. That might have something to do with it. That also sort of ties into what Jimmy Dore was saying about Space Force. Like the Space Force might be the only thing that can protect us from these weird ass things. But if you haven't seen this video, definitely go check it out. If you're not convinced that the idea that UFOs exist, you haven't seen any convincing evidence. I mean, this is one of the most convincing videos ever released. And it essentially is showing a pilot tracking an object that has no traction, seems to defy the laws of physics and gravity, and is going extraordinarily fast in this very, very uniform way. And the pilots the whole time you hear their radio chatter, they're just commenting on how is this possible? How can this little object act this way? So I think, I mean, I'm not saying that I wasn't convinced UFOs exist or they're real before this, but the video is pretty convincing in and of itself. And if it is some kind of experimental military aircraft that's being shown on there, it means that the military or people have access to technology on this planet that far exceeds what we've seen mostly in real life yet. I mean, so Adam G, I'm getting a little distracted, but you asked earlier something that's not a mainstream narrative. John Gold suggested probably the best one. 9/11 Press for Truth sort of remains the most credible, easy to digest 9/11 movie that contradicts the official story. It's mostly centers around the Jersey Widows and the 9/11 Family Steering Committee, which John Gold was very involved in back in the day. Um, and additionally, John, tell me the name of. John also knows the name of um, the second movie. I believe it was originally just stuff from the cutting room floor of 9/11 Press for Truth, but in some ways it's more fresh to me because I didn't see it until maybe like 2 years ago. But I believe it's called 9/11 in Their Own Words, made by the same people who made 9/11 Press for Truth, and it's a little more. Yeah, John Gold just said the title, In Their Own Words, The Untold Stories of the 9/11 Families. Similar vein to 9/11 Press for Truth, but I would almost argue that in some ways it's a stronger presentation. And maybe, and this again could just be maybe because I had already seen Press for Truth so many times. Um, Wonderfully done film. Um, I actually don't mind some of the more far out 9/11 movies either, if I'm being honest. Because over time I've sort of learned to pick and choose which things from various movies that I like, that are credible. Um, so I don't mind. I think that the movie, what's it called, Improbable Collapse, is not a bad movie. It mostly focuses in on the buildings. Um, there's another movie too that I thought was pretty good about Stephen Jones, and I can't remember the name of it. We interviewed the filmmaker for it on. Yeah, it's called Hypothesis. Um, Whatever you think of Stephen Jones as a researcher, um, you would. I think it's worth checking out the film Hypothesis. It's an interesting sort of character study on Stephen Jones. Um, yeah, the Who Is Rich Blee podcast, also made by the creators of 9/11 Press for Truth, is excellent. I highly recommend everybody check that out. Um, I'm trying to think of some other ones that I dig. I mean, I think that the Daniel Hopsicker documentary, I think it's called Muhammad Atta's Flying Circus, or that might be the name of his book. But he also did a documentary version of the same narrative, essentially. Um, I want to say that I really do cherish and appreciate a lot of the things in Loose Change Final Cut, which I believe was the third iteration of Loose Change. I think that a lot of the stuff in there is fantastic. Um, there are some things in there that people have problems with, like Barbara Honecker and things like that, which I can understand. Um, Adam G, did you see Final Cut? Because I think there's actually 4 versions of Loose Change. The most popular one is called An American Coup, and it's narrated by Daniel Sinjata. That one's more of a traditional sort of flow. The final cut of Loose Change, though, is like, it feels very much like it's Dylan Avery, Jason Burmis. It's sort of very much in their style. I feel that the one that came out later was trying more to appeal to a little bit more than mainstream. So check out Final Cut, because I think it's rather strong. Yeah, let's talk about Chomsky a little bit. What is it about him that's so resistant to 9/11 truth? Well, I think, first of all, that he is knee-jerk reacting to a lot of people in the left anti-war scene who sort of came out, you know, overstepped with their own theorizing and speculation about 9/11. Like, Bush blew up the towers, the planes were remote controlled, the Bush administration needed to do 9/11 to get us into Iraq, blah, blah, blah. The last thing I think is particularly important because Noam Chomsky actually did a really interesting breakdown. So a live audience member at some talk that he did asked him about Building 7, what he thinks in Building 7. And Chomsky's response to it was very strange. His response was essentially, why would the Bush administration or the government need to orchestrate the 9/11 attacks if they didn't even blame them on Iraq? If that was the goal of the Bush administration and the deep state, why didn't they just blame the attacks on Iraq? Why do they have why would they use hijackers from all these different Middle Eastern countries? Well, what I find interesting about that is that Chomsky seems to be lacking in recent historical knowledge about the 2001 anthrax attacks. You can't talk about the path from 9/11 to Iraq without mentioning the smoking gun, baby. The 2001 anthrax attacks. That's how we got into Iraq. 9/11 wasn't enough to create the war on terror paradigm. We needed the illusion in this country that terrorist attacks were going to be a way of life, Israel style, right? That we were like the new Israel, that Al-Qaeda or whoever these groups were going to keep attacking us. The 9/11 attacks were localized in New York City. They traumatized people through the television, of course, worldwide and nationwide. But the majority of people in this country didn't feel terrorism, didn't feel that it could actually come to get them at their homes. But you know what did make them feel that way? The 2001 anthrax attacks, where some mysterious individual or group of individuals mailed weaponized anthrax produced by the U.S. government through the U.S. mail system, which eventually ended up murdering a photojournalist who worked for the National Enquirer and an 83-year-old woman from Connecticut. Okay? So the fact that Chomsky just thinks that 9/11 was the stepping stone that eventually got us to Iraq, I just think it just shows that he's very much in a reactionary place about 9/11 truth. He can't honestly zoom out and think about it a little bit. Obnobs. Yes, he wasn't an old FBI guy. So Obnobs asked, Robbie, you mentioned that old FBI guy on Abby's show got weird about the anthrax attack question. Can you talk more about that? Yes, I can. That was not an old FBI guy. That was actually Colin Powell's chief of staff, Lawrence Wilkerson, who worked directly inside the Bush administration, directly alongside sometimes Bush and Cheney during the preparations to go to Iraq. Lawrence Wilkerson has since taken credit for writing Colin Powell's infamous UN speech to try to validate why we should go to war with Iraq. Colin Powell's UN speech almost entirely revolved around anthrax. They even brought up the anthrax attacks in the United States. The Bush administration, though, was very clever, so clever, in fact, that none of them on record directly said that Saddam Hussein did anthrax. They had neocons outside of the Bush administration say that Saddam did anthrax. So we like to think of the Bush administration as being these bumbling idiots. George Bush is a dumb motherfucker. He lied about WMDs. Look how dumb they were. They couldn't even get their intelligence fixed correctly. No, they were actually super clever. They made sure that neocons, dozens of them, outside of the administration, were broadcasting the false information that Saddam Hussein probably was behind the ongoing anthrax attacks. That's how the Bush administration did it. Look up Judith Miller and Scooter Libby. Look up Judith Miller and anthrax. You'll find a very interesting little parallel story there that has nothing to do with Joe Wilson's yellow cake or his CIA agent wife, Valerie Plame. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with Judith Miller actually releasing a book called Germs about how Saddam Hussein or Al-Qaeda were going to try to launch an anthrax attack against this country 3 days before the first anthrax letter hit. Judith Miller's book came out and on store shelves. I shit you not. But let me go back to Lawrence Wilkerson thing for a second. So Lawrence Wilkerson has become this sort of little let's say guy to challenge and and speak regretfully about what he participated in during the Bush era. Lawrence Wilkerson has become sort of a favorite, a darling, if you will, of alternative media. Now, I can understand why. He has a lot of important shit to say, especially had a lot of important shit to say about NATO and NATO extending their membership to Russia in the late 90s. How there was actually, Russia believed, stupidly, of course. I mean, it seems stupid. I mean, come on, Russia. Get your shit together. That they would actually be invited into NATO. So Lawrence Wilkerson has sort of revealed that, reinforced that narrative. However, what I found really fascinating is that Abby interviews Lawrence Wilkerson on the Empire Files. And somehow the whole time he's being interviewed on all these different alternative media shows, he's never asked about his role in not just writing the Colin Powell speech, because he has said that he regrets doing that. He has said that he wishes he could have done something different now, and that he regrets doing that. But he's never been asked about why that entire fucking speech revolves around the 2001 Anthrax attacks. He's never been asked that directly, and asked if he regretted having a role in doing that because it was false. Because there were no attacks coming to us from a foreign country. They were domestic. They came from the U.S. government. Someone in the U.S. government had access to weaponized anthrax and murdered 5 people with it, and infected dozens more. Yeah, so bayonets and harmonicas, I mean, he just put a beautiful quote here. What Wilkerson is willing to say, it makes me feel terrible. My participation in that presentation at the UN constitutes the lowest point in my professional life. I participated in a hoax on the American people, the international community, and the United Nations Security Council. That's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal to say. So when Abby actually interviews him in that Empire Files episode, and this was a little bit, I remember helping Abby out with some of the questions. It was finally, in our minds, a chance to get some kind of answers from Wilkerson about why it leaned completely on the idea of anthrax. So what Wilkerson said was, so Abby goes through this really long question. She kind of lays out all the groundwork for the question by saying, do you regret including so much stuff in that speech about anthrax, given what we now know that the anthrax did not come from Saddam Hussein or Al-Qaeda, but came from a U.S. bioweapons lab? And I might be botching her question a little bit, but that's kind of how it came out. Lawrence Wilkerson looks visibly annoyed in his response, and he says, well, we don't know that. And Abby's like, what do you mean? And he's like, I can't say that right now from the clarity in which you just said it. And he sort of goes on to insinuate that he still believes on some level, and this is what blew my mind, that somehow the anthrax did come from Al-Qaeda or some Middle Eastern group. Now, in the actual interview that was put on the internet that Abby put together, she removed some sections from the interview which I believe show Wilkerson awkwardly trying to dodge the question. And Abby gave me permission. It's generous of her to let me use this cutting room floor material, which I then put on the bonus features for A Very Heavy Agenda. If you watch my Very Heavy Agenda bonus material with the Lawrence Wilkerson full unedited interview section, you'll see how awkward it is. You'll see it. And, at the time, we honestly didn't think much of it. But I remember Abby saying, hey, I already put this interview together, but I have this weird feeling about this one part of the interview that I want you to watch. So she had me watch it, and we both came to the conclusion that he's being how do you say it? How do you say it nicely? I don't want to say he's lying, because I don't know that he is, but he's being very cagey during that section of the interview. He's being very cagey about that. So I would like to speak to him at some point. I mean, I really would. Apparently, he's very open to talking to people, even as people as small as me. He talks to Scott Horton, for example. I think they have an open line of communication. He'll talk to a lot of people. He probably even talks to some of the people at Gray Zone. So Yeah, I mean, we got to get someone from the Bush administration to blow the whistle, or at least to talk about that era of the anthrax attacks. I mean, it seems like Lawrence Wilkerson is willing to talk about just about everything else having to do with the Bush administration, but when that anthrax attack subject came up, he did not like it. And I think that's pretty evident from the unreleased interview footage, which someone asked if it's on Vimeo. It's not on Vimeo right now, but I think I will put it on Vimeo because I keep referencing it. It's unfair to you guys that you have to buy the bonus features of Very Heavy Agenda to see it. I'm not doing that on purpose. So I think I will put it online. Let's play some more of this weird ass game. I'm waiting for more of your questions to pile in. So what do you guys think about Tulsi Gabbard trying to sue Hillary Clinton for saying that she was a Russian asset? I know I brought that up at the beginning, but do you think Tulsi Gabbard actually has a case? So there's a few issues going on. Technically speaking, do you think Tulsi Gabbard actually has a case? Did Hillary Clinton actually use her by name in those original interviews where she accused Tulsi Gabbard as being a Russian asset? I personally don't know if Tulsi Gabbard actually has a case. I think she has a weak case based on the actual information. But at the same time, symbolically, maybe it's important to file a lawsuit against Hillary Clinton for even just insinuating that it was Tulsi who was a Russian agent. So I am kind of torn on it. On one hand, I don't think she has a particularly good, strong case. But on the other hand, I think it does set a legal precedent, or at least will make people think twice in the future of just going out and saying someone's a Russian asset. Tom Collector says she seems Sue happy. Google Hillary. I feel like her case against Google is better. Yeah, I think her case against Google is better, for sure. I mean, technically better. Yes, Ned Ryerson, I think it is also great publicity for Tulsi. I will say it again. I think Tulsi's PR publicity game is fucking dialed in. I mean, she really knows how to get publicity. Even her present vote. I mean, I'm not really interested in having a debate with you guys about why she voted president. I personally think it was done for publicity, and it got her a ton of publicity. And as they say in the business, in any business really, any business that involves publicity, is bad press is good press. If you can keep your name in the headlines like once a week, man, you're killing it. It doesn't. That's a very, and that's sort of the lesson that Trump has learned. It's not a bad thing, even if you're being attacked. Have your fucking your name out there, even if it's getting smeared. If you can have your name out there every week, smeared, positive, neutral, whatever, that's a win-win, baby. I mean, that really is great. It's a net benefit. So I think I subscribe to the old paradigm of good press is bad press. I mean, Trump, all the bad press he's gotten, has it really hurt him in really any way? I mean, in terms of the pussy grabbing tape, I can think of dozens of things where it seemed like, oh my God, this is gonna kill Trump. This looks so bad for him. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, he's fine, dude. This dude's made of Teflon. Actually, in fact, it gave him an excuse to go out there and say some funny, crazy shit on Twitter to just get him way more publicity. Look at that. South of the border smoker, what do you think Tulsi will do now that she's retiring from Congress? What's next for her? Glad you asked that. And I'm probably going to come off as an asshole by answering this question because it's very difficult to talk about Tulsi Gabbard critically without people getting really cult-like and fucking going after you. Since I've already dealt with that dozens of times already, I guess it's not going to hurt now to say that I think what she's doing retiring from Congress is she is actually going to start her own media organization. in the mold of, and I don't mean ideologically, but in the mold of InfoWars or The Blaze. That might sound a little wacky to you guys, but I kind of have a feeling that's where things are going. I don't think she's trying to audition for a job at Fox News. I don't think she's trying to angle to be part of Trump's campaign, anything like that. I think if she can figure out a way to utilize her publicity and her following to become sort of like the new Jimmy Dore or the new TYT or something on that level, I think she's already in a position to do something very, very powerful like that. And she's already shifted the dialogue and the way people talk about war in this country in a very noticeable way to me, that I think she wants to continue to be able to have that same influence over it in the future. And I don't think she'll have that same influence doing anything else than what I just described. I mean, one thing that weirds me out, though, is why do you think Dennis Kucinich is so much behind her? What's up with that? Like, does that make sense? I mean, because I always thought Dennis Kucinich was a little more radical than someone who would endorse someone like Tulsi Gabbard. So I'm kind of, it bothers me. Oh my God, that's a fucked up fatality. Tried to get Kucinich on Media Roots Radio many years ago. Didn't succeed. I think he's great. I mean, I really respect him and I really like him. I just don't get it. She won him, he said today on the Jimmy Dore show. I don't understand what that means. I mean, I could actually understand why Kucinich wouldn't endorse Bernie. I can understand that. I just can't understand why he would endorse Tulsi. I find that, frankly, very, very odd. And I really haven't seen, even his interview with Michael Tracy, where it's sort of about his endorsement, or a lot of it's about the fact that he likes Tulsi Gabbard. Of course, there's not very much critical discussion raised in there. I think it'll take someone like a Jordan Chariton or Greenwald or somebody else to get some answers out of him as far as why he's okay with sort of her war on terror, neoconservative rhetoric. I wouldn't worry too much, John, about Michael Tracy not talking to you. He's got bigger fish to fry right now. He's getting retweeted by Don Jr. I mean, it's like one step away from the president. Apparently, someone actually told me that he was retweeted by Trump, like in that day where Trump was doing like 100 retweets of different people. So somebody says, Robbie, check out the intersection of the war on terror rhetoric deployed by India's supremacist RSS org and the war on terror rhetoric that Gabbard deploys. I see a lot of similarity between that rhetoric, between neoconservative rhetoric, between the Sam Harris new atheism rhetoric. It's very similar to me. So yes, I have seen the rhetoric deployed by sort of Modi supporters against Islam, against Muslims. It's very reminiscent of neoconservative propaganda. Take care, Trish. See you later. Thanks for joining again. Set shot. I don't get the appeal of Tracy. Just in his defense, I kind of get the appeal of him. Sometimes I still find him appealing. I still like that he challenges the status quo. I also think a lot of the ways he's glommed onto and sort of attacked by more establishment leftists is sort of overboard. I think that it's definitely coming from a place of resentment, I think, because he is in the camp of debunking Russiagate, sort of like Glenn Greenwald is. So I do think that on some level, what he's doing is still providing a valuable public service when it comes to things like Russiagate, when it comes to trying to debunk the various bubbles out there. Because I would agree that, well, I would argue that being stuck in any bubble, even if you're a leftist and you only subscribe or look at left-wing political points of view, I think is not the best way to operate in this scene or this world. I think that you need to be able to zoom out or stand outside of the bubble and look at it and be able to criticize it. And I'm not saying that Michael Tracy does that all the time. I mean, definitely when it comes to the William Barr, John Durham stuff, the Horowitz report, he is treating that the same way that neoliberals treat the Mueller report, the Mueller report. I always say his name wrong. Forgive me for that. Mueller. So Michael Tracy sometimes will take in and accept those kind of things, you know, coming from William Barr, the guy who covered up Iran-Contra, and John Durham, the guy who told the CIA it was okay to destroy all their torture tapes. He won't look at that in the same way he'll skeptically look at the Mueller report. So that is a problem. That's him being in his own bubble in that regard. So I think it's always important to be able to step outside of those bubbles and to be able to see them critically. And I think that a lot of the time he's able to do that in certain ways. So I have respect for that. But yeah, I mean, he does things I don't like and you know, pretty often. So I'll continue to call them out. But there's definitely worse people than him out there, for people who deserve to be called out. Yeah, I like Katie Halper too. She's great. She was one of the only people with a platform to come out and defend Abby when Michael Ian Black, for some reason, one day decided to go on a 3 to 4 day long Twitter rant attack on my sister Abby Martin. I mean, that was nuts when that happened. If you don't know who Michael Ian Black is, I mean, he looked so fucking bad by the end of that. It was kind of beautiful to behold how much he was mad online and how much he wouldn't let go and give up and how much he just looked like a fucking moron every day. So nobody here has played this game before? You probably never saw BloodStorm in an actual arcade. I mean, imagine being an arcade operator and choosing to buy BloodStorm instead of Mortal Kombat 2. I mean, you would have been making the most horrible decision of your life. Might have even closed your goddamn arcade if you did that. Because the Mortal Kombat 2 revenue from the time is probably keeping some of these arcades afloat. I mean, that's how popular of a game it was. Damn it, I just threw my weapon. So if you notice, the weapons are like separate detachable sprites from the character, which is a slightly interesting thing, I think. Some respect for doing that. I mean, probably not the easiest thing to program at the time in a fighting game especially. Very unique. I don't think any other fighting game, like I was saying, I don't think any other fighting game had that kind of mechanic going with it until Mortal Kombat 4. Even being able to make the sprites such a way where when they lose their limbs, they can still continue to fight and animate, missing their body parts. I mean, that's kind of cool too. That's, you know, they didn't need to do that. It's like more for novelty, but it's probably took a lot of effort to program that in as well. Yeah, the T2 arcade game, Adam G, I'm going to play on here someday. It's a very fast-paced, things continuously happening kind of game. Hopefully I can get a second player to play it with me because one player is way harder. I don't think it's one of those games where they actually put more enemies on the screen for a second player. I think it's the same amount of enemies for 1 and 2 player. No, I didn't see the Scott Ritter interview on Redline. Tell me a little bit about it. What was Scott Ritter saying? Damn. A little spinal cord on the ground there. Bayonets and harmonicas. I have not played the Star Wars arcade game yet. If you're talking about the original game, that wasn't what I said I was going to play. The one I was announcing that I was planning to play on here is called the Star Wars Trilogy arcade game. That game came out by Sega, I think in like 1998 or 1999, and I would argue it is the best Star Wars game ever made. Star Wars action game ever produced. It's not playable on the Pandora's box. It's a gorgeous to look at game that uses all the original John Williams music. It ends with a lightsaber duel with Darth Vader. It's a truly underappreciated game that never got a home release, and yeah, I have fond memories of it. Bayonets and harmonicas. Yeah, there was several different Star Wars games. So I'm just gonna let you guys hear the music in this game. Kind of reminds me of like Doom. A lot of these American game companies at the time really were into like thrash guitar shit. Like they thought this would make you feel like you're playing Mortal Kombat, I guess. Oh, there he goes. Yeah, it's like thrash rock, like sound. Crix26, I specify action Star Wars because from what I understand, there are a lot of flight sim games out there that are very beloved by people. There's like X-Wing, TIE Fighter. There's a lot of PC games, even Star Wars chess, that people really like still. So I haven't played all the Star Wars games. So I said action game because I have played pretty much all the action games made by LucasArts. Dark Forces is another classic one. It was a first-person shooter. In the theme of, it was a Star Wars first-person shooter. I think it was actually the first-person shooter where you could duck, jump, and fall from high heights and die. So I remember that being sort of weird. The Billy Mitchell cheating scandal, Zyke Thomas asks about. Yes, I did see King of Kong, the Donkey Kong documentary, and you need to check out these other speedrun video game competition people online who are also like from that same era, who were total frauds. There's this one guy, and I can't remember the Atari game, but it's like an Atari game. We were in a little drag race car, and he faked a high score time that was like physically impossible for the program of the game itself to do. And people basically couldn't debunk this guy's high scores for something like over a decade until actual programmers reverse engineered the games that he claims that he got these times in, and showed that the fastest possible time to get in the game is slower than the times that he's claiming. And he did this in several games. And the funny part is, one of the guys who worked officially at this high scores game ranking company was thrown in jail for raping a child. Yes, Ned Ryerson, you know the story. Todd Rogers on Dragster. It's actually more crazy, I think, than the King of Kong story. I mean, they should make a documentary on this crazy motherfucker. He really tried to go full hog on his high score cheating. I mean, I think he holds Guinness Book of World Records in like 10, 15 different games, and they're all probably fake. Pretty weird that someone would spend their whole life trying to become sort of the best like classic Atari game player. I mean, what a weird goal to have, and just to like lie and cheat your whole way through it. So I've gotten a little sick of BloodStorm. As you can see, I'm not very good at it. I didn't really have time to learn the special moves. So I'm going to end this broadcast by playing for you the spiritual prequel to BloodStorm called Time Killers. And I think I'm going to have to actually use the alphabetical order mode here. Yes, Ned Ryerson. I saw a couple of those documentaries on Todd Rogers. They're fantastic. I really get a kick out of reading about all the people who have cheated the speedrun ladder boards. I mean, it's really fascinating. Uh, Bayonets and harmonicas. I'll show you the controller setup here. This might. I hope this doesn't fuck up my entire. Here, let's see if you can see it. Let's see if you can see this. I'm just gonna hold it up. Can you guys see that? That's the Pandora's box. That's what it looks like. 2-player control, 6 buttons on either side, not including the start button. Okay, so here's Time Killers. This is Strata's other previous fighting game. This game was critically loathed. Pretty much every video game publication at the time, Video Game Magazine, just made fun of it for being a terrible-looking game that almost could be 8-bit with some of the ways people described it. They didn't even think it looked 16-bit. Now that I'm turning it on again, I actually don't think it looks that bad. I mean, compared to BloodStorm, I would almost argue this looks a little better. I mean, in terms of just the design. I don't know about the technically speaking, but this game is plays pretty poorly. It has terrible hit detection, collision detection. But as far as Mortal Kombat 1, I mean, this is really the only other game out at the time that had gore that was a fighting game. And it doesn't really have traditional fatalities. You are able to cut off the other player's limbs during combat, similar to BloodStorm. So let's check out this this monstrosity of a game here. So there's a character called Rancid that looks like the lead singer of Rancid, the band. Kind of on the nose there. Let's be the knight. Yeah, see, I like the concept. It's like Time Killers. You're from all these different time periods. Aesthetically speaking, I mean, this game, I have to admit, as a young kid, I was like, oh, this is fucking badass, man.
Time Killer, engage.
Yeah, look at the collision detection on this thing. This makes Primal Rage look like a fucking... Holy shit. Whoa. Anybody in here ever play Primal Rage? I think it was one of Atari's only fighting games, besides Pit Fighter. M. Carbo asks, how did fighting games become so popular during the arcade era anyways? Well, it definitely started with Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 changed the way people played arcade games. For the most part, arcade games were a solitary affair. I mean, they always had 2-player co-op arcade games, like shooters. Before that, like Contra was a 2-player co-op game. Fuck yeah. But yeah, it's very clunky. Ned Ryerson is absolutely correct. This is a clunky as fuck game. No question about that. But I think to answer your question, Carbo, it was like a whole new phenomenon that you can go to an arcade and actually compete against other people. I think it was the ability to compete, because before that it was all about, oh, who has the highest score on the fucking high score screen. I mean, that's like a really old school way to compete in video games. Nobody, by the time I was maybe like 10, 11 years old, nobody was doing that anymore. So, and also Street Fighter 2 was just becoming popular. And even Street Fighter 2 wasn't popular enough where people were crowded around one game, lining up to play the winner. So I think it was actually, I mean, I would argue it was probably Mortal Kombat 2 that really changed the game and made it so that you pretty much, if you're going to the mall when you were a teenager and you played games, you would be going to compete against other people in Mortal Kombat 2. I mean, the chances of going to an arcade with an MK2 machine and finding it empty with no people waiting to play was kind of unheard of. That's how popular of a game it was. They used to have them in 7-Eleven, pizza parlors, miniature golf places. Yeah, there was an era, if people don't remember this, where 7-Eleven actually used to have arcade machines in it. I mean, I can't believe that they would do that, but they did. So I think it was just the ability to compete, against your friend or any stranger at the arcade. And it was sort of a friendly form of competition, other than the story I told on my first episode of the show about a dude physically assaulting me and my friend for destroying them like flawless victories, round after round on Mortal Kombat until they ate up about $4 worth of quarters. Most of the time it was very cordial, it was very friendly. You never really, friendly competition. Things never really got heated. If you were good, people respected you. They were like, oh, damn, you're good at this game, instead of getting mad at you. But, kids will be kids, and there was definitely some douchebags that couldn't handle getting their ass kicked in Mortal Kombat. I remember I had another incident where a kid said I was cheap. He was using the word cheap wrong. Oh, it's too loud now. Okay, thanks for letting me know. So I had an incident where I remember playing as Scorpion in Mortal Kombat 1, and I knew how to do the teleport punch and the spear throw. Of course, his only two special moves in the game. And I wasn't using them excessively, but this kid who was older than me, he was just like, man, you're so cheap, man. You're so cheap. And he was saying I was cheap because I knew the special moves in the game. So people, not everybody could keep their cool. I could understand getting your ego bruised if a small child beats your ass in Mortal Kombat. I mean, I could totally understand that. It was still comical for me though, because I was just sort of like, I'm fucking better than you at this game. Like, what are you gonna do about it? Kind of attitude. So no one really ever fucked with me. I did get really good at Mortal Kombat 2 at a certain point in the arcade. Let's look at this weird ass character. Oh wow, I've already been going for an hour and a half. So fighting games as a whole, I feel like have gone down in popularity because everything is online co-op or online versus mode nowadays. And you can't play a game with hit detection or collision detection like Mortal Kombat 3 Ultimate over Wi-Fi or just over the internet with someone else without a lot of lag. So I have a theory, and there might be some game programmers or people in the game industry in here, so you can tell me if this theory has any merit whatsoever. But I believe that online gameplay versus gameplay fundamentally changed the way that people make action games, where what they do now in collision and hit detection is they make it so that they're able to work smoothly over online gameplay. Because the old way of doing it, like when you're playing Mortal Kombat 3, it's just not fast enough to be able to have a match of Mortal Kombat 3 online with someone without a ton of lag or problems. So I would argue that most new video games that have figured out a way to have versus play online are doing some kind of delay where the collision in the game is actually not immediate. So, for example, most of the 3D fighting games have some sort of like slower, kind of more fluid feel to them where, the animations need to finish before you actually get a punch off, like in Tekken or any of those 3D fighting games, even in some of the new Street Fighter fighting games that are using 3D engines. So I would propose the theory that they've actually ruined games in general and pushed them in a direction where you can really only play games that have sort of slowdown built into them online in versus matches. You cannot play games like Mortal Kombat or games that have immediate collision detection on the internet. You just can't. Anyone who's tried it will realize that you can't do that. Even trying to play a game like let's see, what am I trying to think of? Super Mario Maker 2. It's designed like an old 2D side scroller. It's using a lot of the Mario assets. It's trying to play just like the original Mario game. If you try to play a co-op or a versus match against someone across the world on that game, you'll notice it has a significant amount of lag. It just does. You can't play it smoothly. First-person shooters, I definitely believe that on some level they have something built into the engine which makes the collision detection seem immediate, even though it's an illusion. So I think that, yeah, I mean, you probably know more about this than me. There's probably all differences between all these games with their hitboxes and collision detection. But I will guarantee you that there is no fighting game that plays as crisply as Mortal Kombat that you can play online versus another human being across the country or across the world. If it exists, if there's the ability to do that, I have not seen it yet. I have tried it myself. They used to have Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 on the Midway, I think it was Xbox Live 360, and they used to have online play for that, and it never worked. Never. It was just all laggy as fuck. But there were people on there tearing it up through the lag. I mean, there were definitely some like champions on there. I just could never bother to play it. Yeah, seeing your opponent in real life, Obnobs. I mean, if you're standing next to someone in an arcade competing, it's so much more fun and pleasurable than playing someone online. And, you know, you can do that at home with friends, but it's different when they're strangers, when it's just like anyone could come play you. It was an awesome thing. It was an awesome era of video games. It's too bad, actually, that there isn't any footage of any, like, tournaments, fighting game tournaments from back during that era. If anyone can track any of this down or knows where to find, like, a fighting game, arcade game tournament from the 1990s that's on film, please send it my way. I would love to see if anyone's done that with Mortal Kombat or even Street Fighter from the 90s. And there's footage of that still exists. In a real arcade, specifically. I mean, it doesn't have to be in a real arcade, but I would like to see it in one. I couldn't even beat this first motherfucker. I disgraced my family, and I'm crying. Mantaz is crying. So I'm gonna let this run out and just play one more round so we can perhaps see just one more stage of this game, and then I'm gonna take off. I want to thank you again for joining me, guys, for this episode of MAME Politics, episode 11. It's kind of crazy to think I've already done 11 of these. And if you want to unlock all the previous episodes of MAME Politics, you can do so by becoming a Patreon subscriber of mine at patreon.com/Robbie Martin. Most of these episodes are going to stay online for free. Some of them are going to be locked after the fact, but you can check out the streams for free at any time. It's just that I'm not going to do them at a consistent time. It's just impossible for me to. But yeah, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining again. If you want to follow me online on social media, the best place to do it is probably Twitter, at Fluorescent Grey. You can also check out my documentary film series, A Very Heavy Agenda, www.averyheavyagenda.com. I'm still working on part 4. I know it's been a while since I released that trailer and said it was coming out in summer of 2 years ago now. I know that's probably disappointing to people, but I promise you that I will someday eventually release A Very Heavy Agenda part 4. And it's not going to be part of a new trilogy. It's going to be a standalone film that will definitely reflect on the previous 3 films, but it will be meant and intended to be watched as a standalone film. It's going to be stylistically a little different, too, than part 2 and 3. I'm kind of going back to the more psychedelic format of part 1. There will be, however, narration in it, but think of a little more slick, like if I was able to apply the same slickness that I applied to part 2 and 3 on part 1, that's kind of will be the style of what part 4 is going to be like. Anthrax 2 on Media Roots, I don't know when that's going to come out. I can't make any promises for that. Maybe someday I'll explain the full story about why, but for right now, unfortunately, that is put on hold. Bayonets and harmonicas, it's not Trump-focused, actually. That was going to be my original plan, but it's not. It's going to be kind of all over the place, actually. It's going to be all over the place. So... So this is Rancid. He's a punk rocker with a chainsaw. A really ripped punk rocker, too. You usually don't see those kind of guys. Russiagate, of course, is going to be a part of it. It's not going to be the primary plot, though. It's going to be definitely a part of it, for sure. For sure. Of course, the neocons, the Kagans are going to be in it. Bill Crystal's going to be in it. I think there's actually going to be more Bill Crystal in this one than there were in any of the previous 3 films. So if you like your Bill Crystal, get ready, because he's going to be a pretty big component of this film, for sure. I got my ass kicked. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today on episode 11 of MAME Politics. Let's do this again tomorrow, of course. That crystal smile. What's not to love, right? What's not to love about the crystal smile? Joe Crystal. Look into Joe Crystal, Bill Crystal's son. He works as one of Tom Cotton's top staffers. So that's very interesting. Take care, guys. Had a great time talking to you all, and see you tomorrow.